Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from May 24th, 2024. And we're recording this on Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is actually most relevant, because the market is always moving and changing. Also, as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. We use those two lists for just getting an idea of what was moving in the market, what were the books people were chasing in the moment. We've been doing that for almost 5 years, or actually almost 6 years at this point, sorry. And it just gives us an idea of, should we be chasing the hot books of the moment? What factors put those books on the list, and what factors affect them later that will affect their prices? So should you be patient? Should you go after them? If you've been watching, you mostly should be patient, but there's a little bit of, not always the case. So let's dig into this week's list and see if we can learn anything. First up, we have Lost in Space Annual number 1. This is just a fairly popular Joe Jusko cover, and he was doing a signing at CGC, so that's how it ended up on the list. Occasionally they put these CGC signing authors or artists' books on the list because they seem to be selling at a premium for a little while prior to the signing event. This one was going for $25 raw, 9.8, 165. Wasn't really up a lot, but up a little. Now it's a $10 to $30 book raw. 9.8 went for $107. Just the one recent sale on that. So we'll call this a down and I'll be back. No reason to have chased it in the moment. There wasn't a sustainable difference in its market. It was just kind of a momentary bump because there was some interest in him, getting him to sign some of his more popular covers. Next, we have Ascencia, number 22, excuse me. And this was a mail-in cover. Like, you could only get it by taking a coupon, mailing it in. This is J. Scott Campbell exclusive. It's really obviously a homage to himself in a Danger Girl cover, I believe number 2. But anyway, the raw copies of this mail-in cover were going for $300 back then. Now it's a $75 to $100 cover. 9.8 only going for 2. So yeah, that's a dumpster fire. There was no reason to have chased this for premium prices when it first came out. It still goes for pretty good money. I mean, it's still pretty hard to find, and it goes for a premium, just not the crazy prices that were when it was first hitting the market. Which is kind of something you should pay attention to. A lot of times these limited books, when they first hit the market, people overreact to just how limited they're going to be, and they usually settle. So next we have Godzilla, the 70th anniversary, number 1. Art Adams 1 of 50 on the list for the second week in a row. Last week when we talked about it, it had been like a $150 book that first week, and really current prices were pretty steady compared to then. Now, by this point, though, it was a $250 to $300 book raw, and now it's a $70 to $200 book, 9.8, 300. So yeah, that's down in a trap. There was no reason. That second week peak we often talk about when a book hits the list 2 weeks in a row, and there's a significant jump between week 1 and week 2. It almost never sustains. It's a good sign for if you bought it that week 1, but it's not a good sign if you bought it in week 2. All right, more covers to talk about. We got Blood Hunt, Red Band Edition, number 2. The Logan Lubra, 1 in 25. This Wolverine cover was going for $175 right after release. Obviously, there was a ton. As we'll go through over the next couple of months, we're going to get a ton of these Red Band variants, incentive variants that were hitting the list for Blood Hunt. We've already talked about the variant for number 1. This one for number 2, I said $175 back then. Now it's a $55 to $100 book raw, $100 to $200 for 9.8. But yeah, that's a dumpster fire because most of the sales are closer to the 55 than they are to the 100. Again, another book that there was no reason to go after in that moment. All right, keep moving. We got New Mutants, number 98. You're like, that's not a new book, but the facsimile came out, and they've been doing variants for the facsimiles, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me that we do these variants to the facsimile, because if it's got a different cover, it's not actually... Anyway, this 1 in 25 Deadpool cover was going for $40 to $50 on the facsimile back then. Now it's an which is right around not quite double ratio, which usually means it ends up at ratio or below. And now it's an $8 to $30 book with most of the sales under ratio than over, way more under than over. 9.8 only going for 100. So that's down in a trap. Very much this 1 in 25 stuck to the 1 in 25 rules, this particular case. Next, we still got more covers. We got Spider-Gwen, the Ghost Spider #1, the David Marquez secret variant. Secret variants are usually a 1 per store thing, which means they are basically the equivalent of 1 in 25. This one was only going for 20 to 25, which is never a good sign for one of these. That is not enough to usually sustain it, and that's the case here. Is now a $10 to $20 book with more sales. Again, closer to 10 than to 20, $10 to $20 book, should say. More sales closer to 10 than to 20. So a down and I'll be back, but yeah, no reason to have chased this variant in the moment. All right, next we got a cover / buzz situation, and then the book after it is the same book, but it's just the buzz. First up, we have Doom #1, the Adi Granoff 1 in 100. So this 1 in 100 to this Doom one-shot that came out by Jonathan Hickman was going for $170 to $240, which is a pretty good price on a 1 in 100, and usually getting close to the range where it might sustain. And this one's done okay. It's a $150 to $180 now. 9.8, $450 to $500, which is really, really good. But still down and I'll be back compared to some of those raw prices initially, as it's just a touch lower than the low end of the... it's basically on the low end to a touch lower of what the prices were back then, but not reaching the higher prices it was back then. Next, we have Doom #1, just the A cover. Again, a lot of people were going crazy about this one shot. And yeah, and it was going for $25 to $50 for just the A cover. So the 1 in 100 was going for good value, but so was just the regular A cover. Now it's a $25 to $50 book. So it's basically been extremely steady and worth it. It's the exact same kind of range on prices. 9.8, $75 to $120. So I was a little surprised. This one managed to not avoid the I'll be back or the slight step back. Still going for exactly what it was going back then. All right, we only had one technically MCU book this week, sort of. We have West Coast Avengers #45, the first appearance of the White Vision or the colorless Vision. And yeah, that was basically, we'd gotten rumors that Vision's going to get his own show, that they were coming back to after all these years. It seems like it's been a really long time since WandaVision came out, that we were finally going to find out what happened to the White Vision after that show. So raw copies jumped up to $40, 9.8 jumped up to $197. A reminder that when the show came out and White Vision appeared, 9.8 of this book were hitting $2,000. I kid you not. And now it's $197 when it's hot. But now it's a $10 to $50 book, 9.8, $180. So a slight step back from those prices back in the spring, and when we got this news, but still a very affordable book now and much more accurately priced than it was when originally WandaVision came out. Next, we have two sort of MCU books. These were related to rumors about Deadpool, and it was basically that Blonde Phantom was going to be a part of it. And so we have Sensational She-Hulk #2, the first modern appearance of Blonde Phantom. She's a Golden Age character. Raw copies 10 to 15, 9.8, 110. And now it's a $4 to $10 book. Yeah, I put Come On Man back then because it was just kind of silly spec that really didn't have any basis, and it didn't come true. So it ended up being a down and I'll be back. No reason to have chased it. And then we have Sensational She-Hulk #4, the first full modern appearance of Blonde Phantom. It was doing 5 to 10, so it wasn't even going for as much. 9.8, 115, slightly higher. Now it's a $4 to $10 book. So it's steady in terms of those prices. And same with 9.8, only two recent sales, a $100 sale and a $175. So we're going to call it steady and worth it. But again, this character didn't even show up. So I guess Blonde Phantom was actually, the little note I had was that she was the one that taught She-Hulk how to break the fourth wall and to jump through panels. Because I guess maybe that's something she did back in the Golden Age. So there you go. All right, next we got a whole bunch of X-Men 97 books still. We were post the show at this point, but we were still having them. People were still specking on the show after it had come out. So we have X-Men 97 #2, the second print animation variant, and obviously this is just a Rogue and Gambit cover, and people were in their feels about Rogue and Gambit following the show. So yeah, $10 to $18 back then, and it's still a $10 to $20 book. 9.8, 70 to 90, so people still really like this Rogue and Gambit cover. So it has been steady and worth it. So it's staying right there. So we'll see how long that lasts. But yeah, it appears to be a cover that people really like for these two characters. Next, we have X Factor number 92, the first appearance of Exodus. And basically, at the end of the last episode, there's kind of a wall with different images of mutant characters that are either missing or that kind of stuff. There's a whole bunch of images on the wall. And Exodus is one of the characters in the background on that cameo, or making a cameo on that wall. So people were specking on his appearance, first appearance. So raw copies were $12, 9.8, 100. So not a huge jump in what the values were, but definitely a lot of sales. Now it's a $1 to $10 book, 9.8, 75 to 80. So we're down and I'll be back. It didn't jump a huge amount, and it's kind of just returned back to what it is. Next, we have new X-Men number 133, the first appearance of Dust. Same thing. Was on the image was on that wall behind Forge, I believe, at the end of the season. And yeah, so $15 back then, but a 9.8 on this book jumped all the way up to $280. Which I was like, dumpster fire on that. That seems insane. There's been no 9.8 sales recently. 9.6s are going 50 to 75, so under $100. Raw copies are going for 1 to 15. Literally, there were some $1 sales. We're going to call it down and I'll be back, but I would guess 9.8s aren't going to go for more than like 100 and something. 125, something like that. But there hasn't been any sales, so you can't officially say it's a dumpster fire compared to what it was before. Next, we have Cable number 6 from 1993. First appearance of Rachel Summers as Mother Ascani. And basically, we're getting some background on Cable here. And obviously, we saw Mother Ascani in one of the places that the X-Men were sent. Raw copies back then were $5. So again, it was more of a sales thing than a price jump thing. Now it's a $1 to $7 book. So steady and I'll be back. No reason to chase it in the moment because it's the same price now, but just less competition to buy it. So, all right, 2 books left. We got The Rise of Apocalypse, number 1 on the list for the second week in a row. Basically, raw copies are going 8 to 10, which is the same as what they were doing last week when we talked about it. But last week when we talked about it, like the high slab sale was a 9.8, 65. By this point, a 9.6 had went for 80. There hadn't been another 9.8 sale, but a 9.6 had went for more than that 9.8 the week before. So that was why I was making a second appearance on the list. Now, raw copies 3 to 10. No recent slab sales of a high grade. So we're going to call this down and I'll be back. Most of the sales are like $3, $4, not 10. All right, last book is X Factor number 6, also on the list for the second week in a row. First appearance of Apocalypse. Same raw prices as when we talked about it last week, 65 to 100. But 9.8 jumped from like a 440 for a direct edition 9.8 to 550. So it had jumped up considerably, $100 in a week on the 9.8 sales. Now it's a $20 to $60 book, 9.8, 3 to 400. So definitely a trap. As this book has returned to closer to what the long term has been on the first appearance of Apocalypse. So that is it. That is this week's list. 17 books that we talked about. Still very focused on X-Men 97. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time. Later.